Hello, my name is Fraser Simons. This is my channel, Springboard Thought. I'm a booktuber, and I am doing the latter half of the Canterbury Tales tag by A.J. Dunn Reads and Writes. This is part 2. I was going on, and so I thought I would split it for the first time. I'm picking up from question 15, and let's go. So this one isn't as long. The merchant deals in furs and cloth and is powerful and wealthy. Recommend a book with a powerful message or theme. This is going to be a little bit weird, maybe. Powerful can be interpreted in a lot of different ways. I'm choosing Carry On Rainbow Rowell because the powerful message, I think, is that readers become writers and they can interpret, reinterpret stories. This is like I think it essentially is the progenitor of a lot of mainstream thoughts about fan fiction, or at least centralized it or made it more popular to speak on the topic anyway. So it's a fan fiction of basically Harry Potter, but what if Harry Potter was a little bit different? What if the world was a little bit different? And what if it was queer, i.e. gay, predominantly in the first one anyway. There's more characters that come along. The trilogy is, I would say, not so great. The first book, though, is very charming, I think. It is very indicative of maybe fan fiction style, which is akin to like commercial fiction, I would say. But it's on par with JK's writing for the first few of her books. And I think is like wonderful, basically, that a recontextualization to make something more inclusive, found a mainstream publisher, got popular, sold copies, I heard about it and consumed it. I think that's just kind of an incredible thing to have happened and wouldn't have happened when I was a teenager, that's for sure. The shipman is a wine-stealing rascal. Tell us about a side character who steals the spotlight. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is a book in which every character is more interesting than our main protagonist, who's like this sort of boring, dull guy from nowhere, small town, England, who gets sucked up into space with this adventure. The physician knows what ails you and can cure it. Tell us about a book you consider a comfort read. I think a few people have picked this now because I'm late off the mark, but I would consider The Secret History a comfort read for me. It's very atmospheric. It's steeped in the season, so no matter generally when you read it, you're gonna sink into the season that is like enriched, I guess, on the pages, particularly winter and autumn, I would say, but they go through most of the seasons in this. And most of all, though, the friendship group is just so compelling that you miss them. And when the narrative moves on from like the core specific conceit at the school, you kind of share in the loss of that core dynamic. And I never even went to post-secondary school, so it's amazing that it can provoke that kind of feeling. The Franklin is not a vassal or a noble, but a free man. Recommend a book about freedom in any form. This is a fantastic, again, cyberpunk book, which I know the most about, and haven't really recommended much. So I'm doing a lot of this in this particular tag. River of Gods, Ian MacDonald. Fantastic book. I actually have the follow-up, Siberia Days, something like that, to this. And this is a sprawling, epic mystery fantasy in futuristic India. There is a person who has different pronouns. I believe it's YT pronouns, I think. It's been a while since I've consumed it, but essentially it creates a third gender, third set of pronouns, unique, especially at the time that it was written in like I think '05, something like that, is very unlike most cyberpunk books, even though it has a narrative that is sort of quintessential in like the guy trying to find out the actual killing, like the detective person. But all these people are tied to specific events and also like a cultural change and moment in history that is happening. And so every character in this, in one way or another, as you might expect in a cyberpunk book, is railing against authority in one way or another. The Reeve is believable on the outside but lies on the inside. What book was different than what the blurb led you to believe? I like that a lot. So I'm going to be talking about the essential Ruby. For one, this says translated by Coleman Barks, but he's essentially just the author. It is disgusting because essentially he has co-opted Rumi's poetry third hand and then put Rumi's name on it and made bank. And certainly the most sold book on Rumi, because most people assume that it is actually Rumi when it isn't. He doesn't speak the language. He talked to, through secondhand, I think, a translator who tried to describe his translation to him, and then he was inspired by what that person said and then wrote poetry of that inspiration. So it really does, it's not Rumi whatsoever. Is instead contextualized entirely as Jesus and God and Coleman Barks' own faith. And it's problematic and not good either. I have talked about a smaller Everyman edition, Rumi edition, that is fantastic, that has Barks in it as well, but it has the specific poem translated by 4 or 5 different people, so you can kind of see what Coleman Barks has done, as well as the other translators, and it's just a fantastic piece, whereas this is trash. The Plowman is good-hearted and faithful. What book do you read over and over again? So I chose actually a comic book series for this. I don't generally reread comics all that often, but I found myself rereading this because there's a large gap. At least when it was coming out, it is now complete. I think 6 issues. But there was, Jonathan Hicks sometimes goes through these phases where he has a really banging idea. He puts out the first couple books and then he gets really busy, or the artist gets really busy. It's creator owned through Image, so they can kind of just set their own schedule, do what they want, take their time. He generally always finishes his projects. This is just a fantastic murder mystery with the best weird occultish setting ever, where it's a critique of capitalism and all the banks are different sects of occultism, basically, that interact with money in some way. And that cover is supposed to be Mammon? I'm not sure how you pronounce the old god of coin, money, currency, etc. And it is about a black detective who gets called on a very strange ritualistic murder. Think True Detective, but noir, black person, kind of Louisiana vibes with overt occultism, sort of supernatural vibes going on. Absolutely fantastic. Made me want to just reread it again right now. The Gillsmen are 5 men who act as a unit and stand for brotherhood or sisterhood. Recommend a book with a strong ensemble cast of characters. I'm going with Joyce Carol Oates' Carthage. Every single character in this was just so well realized. It is about a young girl who, just out of nowhere it seems, goes completely missing. And in the first bit of it, we follow their lives before it, and then we follow after. So the sort of ramifications on the family, but also the actual town is essentially a character that's being examined, and through that lens, investigating or examining, interrogating the ostensible notion that people put forward where when women go missing, it only affects the family, and everybody moves on and they don't care and whatnot. It shows that a woman going missing, or teenage girl, I think she's on the cusp of adulthood, like almost going to college perhaps. Her going missing has a ripple effect and devastating effects essentially on absolutely everybody. And yeah, every character is fascinatingly drawn, even the unlikable ones, particularly the father in this is just infuriating in the way that he is treating his daughters especially, but sometimes his wife as well. But yeah, it is completely fantastic, and couldn't think of a character that was uninteresting in this book. The cook makes the food that feeds you. Tell us about a book that feeds your soul. This book was really fantastic. Why Fish Don't Exist. I saw this on Heidi's Reading Life recently, and it really put it in the forefront for me. It has... kind of like Heidi said, it sort of engenders like hope, positivity, and tackles difficult subjects, especially problematic people in science, perpetuating incorrect information, misinformation, being unethical, yet simultaneously saying that we can take back the narrative, co-opt it, and adapt it to something truthful. Science is, liquid. It is constantly changing, moving, adaptable, and we can make it fit the actual quote-unquote correct things until we get new information, even when there are bad actors participating in it. The Yeoman Serves You. Tell us about a book that served its purpose, that did what you wanted it to do. It wasn't great, but it wasn't bad. A sort of neo-cyberpunk book, I guess is what I have been calling them. Walk Away is, it did exactly what it set out to do. It didn't blow me away, which is kind of meat and potatoes work for Dr. O. He is a good pioneering, actually, I would say, cyberpunk author, who has very interesting ideas. Sometimes the plot aren't fantastic, but he's good at conveying the ideas, and he's always on the cutting edge of stuff. I think he works for like iOS 9 or something like that. He's in technology, heavily embedded into it, and concerned with ethical use, technology, hacking, on the cutting edge of all things cyberpunk, essentially. And this is about young, very smart, basically like think Ivy Leaguers going to a particular college that see society for what it is, like a house burning, and they literally just walk away. There's more and more people in this near future place doing it, and they set up small communal stations around that are not completely legal, and sometimes maligned, sometimes attacked by the police, sometimes embedded by police officers to disrupt them, sort of like in a union type of way. And the technology is such that they have like fabrication devices, so they can generally make whatever they want, including food and whatnot. And it is essentially about trying to live a more ethical life, unconstrained from like the societal roles that are established, including like a nuclear family, normal relationships. There's some queer characters in this that are handled reasonably well, but not particularly super highlighted. So I wouldn't say it's like a queer read, but it is clear that his intent is to make it more inclusive. And yeah, it was just solid. It was a good read. I'm glad that I picked it up and read it, but I don't generally like think of it often or anything like that. The second nun talks about a saint's life in her tale. What book do you praise often? I don't think I've praised it on here enough. I think because the format is kind of gangly. But The Private Eye, another cyberpunk book that flies under the radar, published by Image Comics. It is hard to display, to say the least. Fantastic story, again, near future, in which the government has essentially been supplanted for privacy, and like a group of hackers essentially doxed the entire world at one point. And I can't remember what they call it, but everything came out all at once. It affected privacy laws, and of course conservatism reacted very highly. And so this person is a private investigator who wears this hood, specifically to like fool camera recognition and stuff. And he gets embroiled in a murder mystery plot. It is fantastic stuff. I believe, yeah, Brian K. Vaughan, so the same guy who's doing Saga right now, right? And Why the Last Man, lots of stuff. Fantastic art. You can actually get this, I can't remember the website, but if you look up Private Eye, it's part of a collective in which you can get their comics for free digitally, and then you can pay for them if you have the means to and want to after you can consume them. So you really lose nothing by trying this out. The Nun's Priest is witty and doesn't take himself too seriously. Recommend a book that has a funny or witty main character. So for this, it might seem strange because it's kind of nonfiction, but I went with The Inconvenient Indian, which I think I lent to my aunt. A memoir in which Thomas King analyzes essentially pop culture for the ways in which the current depiction of Indians slash indigenous people, First Nations, depending on where you are, have become like co-opted, diminutive, racist. Like how the kind of quintessential view of what typical Canadians have of Indigenous people has come from, and he's surprisingly adept at weaving in a lot of humor. Even though the subject matter is very like serious, he's really good at alternating so it doesn't get too heavy. He also is very real about it though. It's a completely fantastic book. He is obviously very like erudite and all of this stuff. It is completely fascinating to dive into the history of this stuff and see how the narrative was constructed, especially from Hollywood stuff. Who was allowed to play Indigenous roles, who wasn't, why that was, if it was intentional, it was, why. He really knows his stuff. It really is fascinating. And then the last is to tag some folks. So I wanted to tag Biblio Sophie, who's a new channel and really fantastic. I think she's Canadian as well, so probably cool. Saren Reeds, I saw, did a excellent review of Mona that I just read. Fantastic book that I'll be doing a wrap-up of, I guess, before you see this video. And she has a fantastic review of it, as I said, so you should definitely check out her channel. I'll link maybe that specific review because a lot of people are kind of like middling on that book or dislike it, and I thought it was just phenomenal as she did. Who hasn't done this tag yet is the problem. I'm quite slow. Reed Becca maybe hasn't. I don't think Kier the Scrivener has either. Enter the Book, have you? And Books with Zara, we'll go with that. Check out the channels, do the tag if you would like to. I think I'm very slow off the mark with this one, so most people have done it, but if it appeals to you, you should just do it. I'm sure AJ would love to see it, as would I. Bye.